Hello, healthy people, and welcome back to Organelle. Today, fats. The good, the bad, the potentially cancerous. We cover a lot of ground in this one, everything from the exact foods to eat and not to eat, through to Lionel's breakfast habits, and whether milk is fit for human consumption. As always, I'm Xavior Greenhound, and joining me will be none other than the Organelle digital health platform's leading expert, Lionel Godwin. So, without further ado, let's take the next step on our health journeys. Welcome back, my friend. How are we?
Xavier, I've had an interesting week, but I'm up on deck now and ready to fire.
Yeah, terrific to be getting back into it. Today we're talking about fat, because in one of our last episodes you went a whole large tangent about how important it is that we understand the differences between the types of fat and what those do for our bodies. So, to get straight into it, Lionel, could you explain to us just briefly what is fat and what are some of the forms we find it in?
All right, so fats are a type of nutrient that we categorize in the body as lipids, and they're really essential for our body's proper functioning. They provide energy, they aid in the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, and minerals, and they also contribute to our cell structure. Um, so they are a really integral part of our overall health and well-being. There are generally, when we're talking about fats, we're talking about three different types of fats. So there's the saturated fat. Now, saturated fat is a fat that's solid at room temperature. It's found mainly in animal products, and it's the fat that we don't really want in our bodies. It's can lead to increased cholesterol and certainly heart disease. So we try and avoid saturated fats as much as we can. We then have our monounsaturated fats, excuse me, um, and these are generally liquid at room temperature. We find them in things like olive oil and avocados. They're really beneficial for our heart health. They provide a really good building block for energy as well. And then we have the polyunsaturated fats. The polyunsaturated fats are also liquid at room temperature, and they're found more in your fatty fishes, your nuts, and your seeds. And again, they provide a really good source of energy and promote good heart health as well.
Have we skipped one there? We've just trans fats are so evil that we don't even talk about them.
Yeah, oh, no, no. We should always talk about trans fats. Yeah, that was very remiss of
They're
me not to
just
mention
legit
that.
so removed from your diet that you forgot they
Well,
existed.
yes, exactly right. I never engage any trans fats in anything that I eat, but um, trans fats are those. They're really artificially created unhealthy. They're a fat that is used in. It's what we call hydrogenated fat. So it's a fat that has just added so many different links to the fat chain, and they're really unstable and they're really oxidative in the body. They provide a lot of oxidative stress. They provide a lot of inflammation in the body, and we will have a podcast on inflammation another day. But yeah, trans fats are the worst fats. They contribute really badly to obesity, to heart disease, to mental impairment, and they're the worst fats. They're the fats that we find in, if we were to buy packets of chips and lollies and biscuits and cakes and all those pre-packaged stuff that is really, really very unhealthy for us, and there's no value at all in eating anything with trans fats in them.
Yeah, I can understand that because, one of our key metrics for healthy eating is just avoid stuff that's overly processed. So that trans fats are evil makes no surprise to me. But the saturated fat thing throws me through a bit of a loop. It seems like those are mostly animal fats. Those are things that we would have evolved to eat over millions of years. Why are those bad for us? We
Primarily
substituted out
because
fats and we
they
started putting a bunch of
really
sugar in
they
things, and now
they
we've come
really
back
clog our
around and we
arteries.
started
They
saying that
raise
sugar
our
is the
low
devil and we
density
started to put fat
lipoproteins.
back
That's
in
the
our
main
diets. So how has that
reason
changed
that
over
they're
time and
so
why?
bad. And once we're starting to raise those low density lipoproteins, that's that fat that clogs our blood vessels and our arteries, which can really increase heart disease and lead to heart attacks and strokes and the like. So they're the fats that are hardest to remove from the body as well. So they're just really non-beneficial to us. If we can avoid them, and there was, you're right, we grew up eating a lot of animal fats. People who ate a lot of steak and chops and sausages and stuff, they thrived on them, but they were doing nothing for our longevity or our mortality rates, that's for sure. It's changed primarily because as science has improved, as our capacity to evaluate, measure, and monitor within the body, and particularly through biomarker tests like our blood test and others, we're able to now see what fat does and how fat is used within the body. So we have far more accurate ways of determining whether the fats are working for us within our bodies or being harmful within our bodies. And it's those measurements that have allowed us to change our thought processes around fats. We went through a stage where all fats were considered bad there for a while, but that's now changed. We now know that the body uses monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats really, really, really well. We know that the liver doesn't struggle as much in processing those fats or removing those fats from our bloodstreams as it does with saturated fats. So, it's really come down to the science, Xavier, to be honest. The science and our ways and means of measuring and monitoring have helped us change our whole outlook on fats. We also understand now that fats, for a lot of people, have been a great source of energy and a very efficient source of energy as well.
Yeah, I don't know much about that, but I know there's something called ketosis that your body goes into where it starts using fats instead of carbs. Could you briefly explain what that's? That was a big part of the keto diet, right? You completely eliminate
Yes,
carbs and then your body starts using fat as fuel. What's
yes.
happening there?
Um, Ketosis is a really and the ketogenic diet you referred to that, and it's a diet where it was a high fat, high protein, low carb diet, and it there's some really, when you start to limit the carbohydrates and increase your fat intake, the body is forced to rely on fat for fuel. So that's the primary reason that people do it. Relies on fat for fuel, um, and this can have, for some people trying to lose weight really really quickly, this can have benefits. It can really help lose weight quickly. It can improve your insulin sensitivity, and in some cases, a lot of people have said that their mental clarity improves. However, you know, we've got to be really careful when we start going on these really restrictive diets like this. For me, there's a lot of drawbacks in going down that pathway. We end up with a lot of nutrient deficiencies because we're limiting our carb intake. We can suffer from constipation because we don't have the fiber in our diet that we would like. We have, and it's really difficult to maintain a long-term compliance around a ketogenic diet. You really are restricted with your calorific intake and the type of calories that you are taking in. And for me, you're just not having a balanced diet when you're going down the pathway of a ketogenic diet or a high-fat diet. And I would be strongly recommending anybody going down that pathway that they do not do so unless they've really consulted their GP or their healthcare professional to get some really solid advice around it. Because I don't see any long-term benefit at all in it at all. I actually see it being very harmful to people in the long term because of those nutritional deficiencies that manifest themselves over time with a high ketogenic diet. But again, the reasoning behind it was, as I said, it's really about improving your insulin sensitivity and limiting your carbs so that your body's virtually forced to rely on fat for its energy.
That's really interesting. Is there obviously too much fat leads to that? Is there an optimal amount of fat we should have in our diet, like in terms of maybe percentage of our daily intake?
Yes, look, I like personally to have around 30% of my diet. 30% of my diet I like to be fat. good fats in terms of the monounsaturated and the polyunsaturated fats. Um, Certainly no more than that for me. Other people are different depending on their energy needs and their calorific intake and the like. It can change.
What would you consider your like top five most frequently used sources of good fat?
For me, that's really, really easy. Just so for me, it's avocados, number one. It's nuts and seeds, number two. It's olive oils and or fish oils, number three. And then it's coconut oil to a lesser extent would be my number four, and seeds.
So take us on a little bit of a tangent for a second. Just in regards to coconut oil, I have a can of coconut oil in my cupboard, and it's got a one-star health rating. For those of you who don't know, in Queensland and maybe the rest of Australia, the government assigns a certain health star rating to certain foods that are canned or otherwise labelled, and they're allowed to display that rating when they're sold at a grocery store or something. So coconut oil, or my can of pure raw coconut oil, has a health star rating of 1 out of 5. So the government thinks that this is an atrocious thing and I shouldn't put it in my body. Why is that, Lionel?
Yeah, there's mixed views around coconut oil. I don't use coconut oil itself, and I certainly wouldn't use it for cooking or anything like that. But I do use coconut oil in the form of the whole husk, the coconut itself. So I like to use coconut um, as in the coconut fibre in my breakfast cereals, for instance. It's a what's known as a medium chain fatty acid, and for me personally, I just think it's a good addition to my everyday diet, but in moderation. I would only ever have 10 to 15 grams of coconut flakes, for instance, not even 10 to 15 grams, probably more like 5 grams on my cereals in the morning. I like the fiber content and the mixing the fat with the fiber in my cereal in the morning is useful, but the oil itself, I don't like to use.
I should have guessed that you would just literally have a coconut tree. Okay, you said you said something interesting there, and that you have cereal for breakfast. I
I
wouldn't have
do.
guessed that.
Yeah, I
There's a
do.
wholesale movement against cereal being evil. So talk us through that, Lionel.
Yeah, again, I use my form of cereal is either oats or rice bran cereal because they're very rich in beta glucans. They're very rich in a lot of other properties as well, and they're a great substance to fuel yourself. I don't eat it on its own. I have a combination of my nuts and my seeds, kiwi fruit, mixed berries or blueberries, banana, and some oat milk, and that's if I'm not having a smoothie for breakfast, that's my preferred source of breakfast. I find it very filling. It gives me great energy, and I'm ticking all of the boxes when it comes to getting a good broad cross section of all the nutrients that I require to start the day. I generally don't. I get up at 5:30. I walk to the gym. I train. Um, Walk home and have my breakfast between 8:30 and 9 every morning. So I've been up for 3 hours before I have my breakfast, and I just find that cereal is very, very, very beneficial for me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so we talked about some of the good fats that we have. What are some of the really common, or rather to say it this way, what are some food items that people consume on a very regular basis that contain a large amount of these bad fats, but they don't realize it?
Um, well, most people don't realise. Most people don't realise, particularly trans fats. So, trans fats are virtually in every packaged and or highly processed or highly refined product that we eat out there. So, the most common, like, for on a day to day basis, the any prepackaged bars that you buy, whether they be protein bars or nut bars or so-called health bars, breakfast bars, those types of things. Cakes, um, lollies, um, uh, pre-packaged chips, and those types of things. Um, Whenever we're buying chocolates, blocks of chocolate, and particularly they're not cacao based chocolates. Anything that's really highly processed, highly refined, and high sugar is generally full of fat. Barbecue shapes, the dry biscuits, a lot of the dry biscuits that we buy, most of them contain high levels of trans fats, dangerously high
Damn.
levels.
Okay, so what about what came to my mind? Cartoned milk. What's the because we talked about saturated fats being animal products and those being bad. What's the fat content of like regular full cream milk?
Well, I can go and get a carton of milk and have a look and tell you. I don't off the top of my head know what the fat content is, but I can quickly go to the fridge and have a look. Um, what it is higher. I'm not a fan of dairy milk for human consumption anyway. I'll just put that as an aside. I'm not going to stop people from drinking it if that's what they choose to do, but I'm not a fan of it. It can increase inflammation within the body, and I don't like that. And people make a lot of people make the mistake of using skim milks and stuff where the fat's been taken out of the milk and replaced with sugar. Well, that's just as bad. That sugar is converted, if it's not burnt up, is converted by the liver into fat anyway. And that's again the worst type of fat. It's the fat that's going to clog our arteries and our blood vessels. So um, the you know if someone is going to eat drinking milk, I'd rather they drink a full fat milk than a fat reduced milk. But as I said, for humans, I'm not a great fan of consuming milk anyway.
Okay, just to follow that up real briefly, because I know we're running out of time here. You said that you're not supportive of milk for human consumption, right? Does that mean your view would be that lactose intolerance is perhaps the natural way of things, and that not having a lactose intolerance is the weird thing?
No, no, you can't say that. I mean, no, no. Humans have consumed dairy for hundreds of years. Lactose intolerance is more to do with a food sensitivity than anything else. And there's a number of reasons, and we'll get into food sensitivities and food allergies perhaps on another occasion. But generally, lactose intolerance is more to do with a food sensitivity, so it causes some digestive disruption as opposed to an allergy, which causes an immune response within the body.
Yeah, we'll certainly have to get into that in another episode. But for now, that's all for this one. Thank you so much for your time today, Lionel.
Good on you. Thanks, Xavier. Good to see you.